The Chiefs have scored 2 Super Bowls in the time that it's taken Daniel Jones to throw 2 touchdowns at MetLife Stadium.
They don't need to go 17-0. They need to be.
They don't need to go.
It doesn't
will
matter.
they go? Will they go?
They will not go 17-0.
Oh, here we go. Can the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott?
Hell no. Hell no. No. They are the worst run organization that should be successful in the NFL, and it all comes down to Jerry Jones.
Do you think that NFL athletes, they could be the greatest athletes in the world?
I think naturally, yes.
I love the U.S. at times, but that ain't the world.
Every time I see that, I hate everything about that. It is so misguided and short-sighted.
Welcome to the NFL Rundown on talkSPORT End Zone. 3 big NFL questions. We're going to answer them for you, and we'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that are now undefeated, still 8-0 after beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. So, Brian, can the Kansas City Chiefs go this whole season undefeated?
Why not? They've made it this far. They should not be undefeated. They could have lost the first game of the season. They could have lost the second game of the season. This is a team that has found a way to win, and they just keep winning. And you throw in the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, who continues to look like old, good Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. You have that stadium. You have the confidence. Oh, yeah, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. They're going for the three-peat. Taylor Swift is in the suite, and she's not even that big of a deal anymore because this is just what happens with the Kansas City Chiefs. All they do is win. There is a game on their schedule that I could easily see them losing, but knowing the Chiefs still win that game, that's at Buffalo in a couple weeks. This is a Chiefs team that rivals the Lions for being the best team in the NFL. They can go to overtime. You think they're going to lose again, and they keep finding a way to win. And yeah, they added DeAndre Hopkins, and he had 2 touchdowns on Monday Night Football. It's always, I say this every week, it's always so hard to argue against, to pick against the Kansas City Chiefs.
But the game on Monday Night Football, Phoebe, it went to overtime. Todd Bowles, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, had the opportunity to go for 2. He didn't. He got that extra point, enabling it to go to overtime. But part of me kind of thinks, like, with the Chiefs, it just feels inevitable. You give them a chance. You give them a chance to go to overtime. You kind of, you know what's going to happen. They're going to win.
They are. I mean, we saw it in the Super Bowl, right? When you're talking about the 7th longest Super Bowl of all time, when they take it into overtime, they run it down. I mean, it was the same here. And I can see where Todd Bowles is coming from. You're thinking our defense is doing a nice job throughout this. The Chiefs have not been playing well. They had a couple of those big breaks, but actually we can do this when you're looking at it from a Buccaneers perspective. But you cannot give the Chiefs that opportunity. And we've seen it too many times that they're able to create a drive, a sustained drive, and they know how to win. Like when you talk about overtime, everybody's exhausted. Defensive line's exhausted. They've been chasing Mahomes around this whole time, and they are incredible. I mean, in multiple ways, Travis Kelce playing big, having Hopkins back. I saw this really great stat that said the Chiefs have scored 2 Super Bowls in the time that it's taken Daniel Jones to throw 2 touchdowns at MetLife Stadium.
That can't be real. That can't be real.
It's real.
That cannot be real.
He just got his first one this past weekend.
And I'm sorry, did Todd Bowles, I'm okay on Todd Bowles. Like he's not the greatest coach. He's not a bad coach. He's, great defensive coordinator. Did Todd Bowles not watch the dude, if you give the Chiefs the opportunity, if you give Mahomes the opportunity, they're going to win that game. Did you not watch them against the Bills and Josh Allen in the shootout? I think of when they played the Houston Texans in a playoff game before they won their first Super Bowl. And the Texans were up, I think it was 28-0, and that game is over. And the Texans gave them a little opening. If you give Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce an opening, they will find a way to win. That is why they are 8-0. You have to kill them. If you have a chance to go for the throat, you have to do it. And if you lose, you lose. And guess what? The Bucs lost.
Now, I kind of feel like at the same time, I'm talking about the Kansas City Chiefs being inevitable. And I kind of do feel like it's that way. When you watch them play, you kind of think, they probably got this, no matter who they're playing, because we're just so used to it. Are they boring, though? Are they boring?
I don't see how you can think winning is boring. I mean, I think people get tired of the winning, but watch that game last night.
Because they're not the same sort of team, though, are they, Phoebe? They're not the same team that is just going to throw it 45.
They were a pretty good team.
I'm not saying they're not a good team. I'm just saying,
look
are they
at that
boring?
Throw to DeAndre Hopkins on the scramble. He is triple covered, and he comes down beautifully with it. I mean, there's highs and lows. Mahomes, he gets injured. You think he's out. You think that's it. I mean, again, you're thinking back to Super Bowl versus the Eagles. He's injured, and then he makes this big, massive run. I mean, because they win in different ways, I don't think it's boring. I mean, look at who they've got out. They're missing Rashee Rice. They're missing, Juju Smith-Schuster. They're missing
Hollywood Brown.
You've got, Xavier Worthy, first almost touchdown. They almost lose it. You think, oh, that's it for him. But because they're able to find all these weird and wonderful ways of winning, yeah, it may not be as flashy and that magic that we're used to seeing, but man, they're doing a terrific job and they're winning. And at the end of the day, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Phoebe. If you win 30-24 in overtime, that game is almost over. Patrick Mahomes comes back from an injury. DeAndre Hopkins shows up on primetime national TV with 2 touchdowns. Looks like DeAndre Hopkins from 2017, 2018. If you put up 30 points with Patrick Mahomes on primetime television, that's a thrilling game. And it'd be different if they were the San Antonio Spurs from the 2000s with Tim Duncan. It was fundamental NBA basketball, and it got a little boring after a while unless you appreciate, like I do, the beauty of the hardwood. Or even, the Patriots for a few years where it was a system type of offense, the early part of the dynasty, the first decade, it was mostly defense. They were going to kind of run you down and win on a field goal, 17-13. That is not the case. This is the Kansas City Chiefs team that's still one of the highest scoring offenses. And to Phoebe's point, they're so creative. I think from a football purist standpoint, the fact that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid can keep doing this week after week is a total testament to just how talented they are. And I have no problem with success. I have no problem with money. And I have no problem with a team that finds a way to win.
Well, speaking of, a team that finds a way to win, you need the players to do so. And as we mentioned before, DeAndre Hopkins has come in, productive game for him. Travis Kelce as well, the first 35-year-old with 14 catches in a game, 14 or more catches in a game. I mean, he isn't the same Travis Kelce. We don't need to necessarily get into it, too much. He's not the same Travis Kelce, but he is someone that is producing. And at the end of the day, production is key, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, the Chiefs are known for someone that stay ahead of the sticks. Look at this game on Monday Night Football. How many times was he sacked at 10 plus yards back? You're in third downs, these third and longs. Kelce is the guy he's looking for. It doesn't matter how many reps he has or what his play has looked like so far this season. He is still on the same page as Patrick Mahomes. Whether you're talking about that little whip route coming out or that little sit and he turns the right way right at the right moment, he is that guy, and they have that connection that is undeniable when you talk about the greats of quarterbacks and tight ends. Your Bradys and Gronks, they have that same connection, and that's what's so key. If you look at it, what makes a successful offense? You've got obviously a coordinator, great quarterback, usually some sort of tight end or go-to body, and a great pass rush. Here they've got Chris Jones in this situation from that interior piece, but they have the piece of the puzzle to be successful.
Having DeAndre Hopkins step up in that game, that is the big takeaway from that game, because Travis Kelce post-game, he's not talking about Mahomes or we got the win or we went in overtime. He's praising DeAndre Hopkins because he knows they cannot do this again. They cannot become the first team in NFL history to three-peat without a number one wide receiver, a go-to wide receiver, because that takes so much pressure off Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce's not getting 200 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He's given 100 receiving yards and maybe a touchdown. He's a good blocker, and that's what Kelce does right now. He is the veteran. They have to have someone like D-Hop, and we saw classic throwback D-Hop last night. If you're a Chiefs fan, if you have a bet on the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, that was a huge game last night for DeAndre Hopkins.
We'll go into a bit of the schedule and what they've got coming up and whether they can be undefeated in just a second. But, if you are an offensive coordinator, a head coach, a defensive coordinator that is facing the Kansas City Chiefs over the next few weeks, Phoebe, what makes them so hard to beat?
Is the different ways in which they will set you up, right? I mean, they've got great opening scripts. Their first 15 is always phenomenal. And they're able to come back from setbacks. So whether we're talking about, again, those big sacks that normally you wouldn't see. I mean, Vita Vea was in the backfield so much. If you're looking at what they're able to do, they'll show you the same thing multiple different times and then run something totally different on it. Yeah, they ran a reverse that got blown up a little bit, but actually they'll come back to something else. So you have to, when you're game planning for the Chiefs, they give you so many different things to look at and so many different plays off of similar formations. How do you then install that to your team and say, well, actually, let's really just focus on this, or let's focus on that? There's too many things and too many people in which they can hurt you.
Well, look, the Patrick Mahomes, he did roll his ankle again. It has to be said that he rolled his ankle again, and there is it does look like he's going to be okay going forward. He says he's going to play going forward. That is going to be a consideration, obviously. They're going to try and, I suspect, make sure that he doesn't scramble so much to make it worse. Let's look at some of the games that they're playing, right? You mentioned the Bills earlier. Now, that is probably going to be the one that, when we're talking about can the Chiefs stay undefeated, that's going to be the one that we're looking at. They've got Steelers on Christmas Day as well, the Texans coming up as well. Looking at these games, let's answer the question, Phoebe, do you think it's realistic that the Kansas City Chiefs can stay undefeated?
I don't think it's realistic they can stay undefeated. And truthfully, does it matter? Do they need to stay undefeated? Because what they've proven is all we need to do is win in the postseason. 100%. So I don't think they're really thinking, oh yeah, we need to, maybe they get that bye, which will be so huge for them. But the Bills are going to be probably the biggest challenge of those three teams that you mentioned. I think the Bills are on a roll right now. They're going to test them in different ways.
And they're really going to want to beat the Chiefs as well.
There is so much history there.
And it's in Buffalo. You're dealing with Buffalo and the Bills Mafia.
What's that crowd going to be like?
Oh
yeah,
gosh,
I know that's a fantastic game.
It is. And then the Steelers, I mean, they are getting better, right? They've been picking it up more in the second half. Russell Wilson has been terrific for them. You've always got the conversation around that defensive line. And then, to be honest, I don't feel the Texans are the same team that we saw either week 1 or the end of last year. And I feel like they're less of a threat across the board. CJ Stroud is really struggling at the moment. But that Bills game, I think, is going to be really key to tell you who are the Chiefs against a really good team.
You think the Bills can beat the Chiefs?
I want the Bills. Can I be biased like that? No, I think that this is the matchup we're always looking for. And I love that this game is later on in the season. We saw the schedule. You had the Bengals playing the Chiefs earlier on. They thought that would be a good game. Ravens, we thought that would be a good game. This is going to be a game of two teams who have very clear, although they're not great identities, very clear identities. And I think this is the matchup everyone wants to see. If it wasn't for Mahomes, Josh Allen would be the one that everyone's talking about, right? With the magic that he creates. But because Mahomes is Mahomes, he's always going to get that front runner conversation.
And do you know what's quite exciting as well is that no matter what happens in the Chiefs-Bills game, there is a distinct possibility. You could argue likelihood, actually. There's a distinct possibility this isn't going to be the last time we see those teams face each other. And that's what gets you excited. Hopefully not. Okay, so you're going to go with a no. The Kansas City Chiefs cannot stay undefeated. Brian.
They can do it. There's two answers here. And I said earlier, why not? They are the team to do it. They are the only remaining undefeated team. Number one, you're playing an extra game. Number two, Patrick Mahomes' health is paramount to everything else. Right. Travis Kelce's health. He's 35 years old. He's an old guy. What if in a couple weeks, old guy from the NFL? I'm older than Travis Kelce. What if in a couple weeks, Travis Kelce has an ankle issue? You're keeping him out for a game that you don't have to win. They don't need to go 17-0. They need to be.
They don't need to go.
It doesn't matter.
Will they go? Will they go?
They will not go 17-0.
Oh, here we go.
They will not go 17-0. No one has done it before. It's so hard, and the only team that's ever done was the Miami Dolphins. And
the Patriots were 17-0. They lost to the, or not 17-0, I suppose.
They weren't 17-0. They were 16-0.
Yeah.
That's my point. You add that one extra game, and so that you're already doubling down on the difficulty, on the odds of that. I look at that Steelers game. I think they beat Buffalo. I look at that Steelers game. I believe it's in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. It's a Netflix game. Whole world will be watching that game. That's where I think they lose. It's almost impossible to go undefeated in a 17-game season, but if there's a team that can do it, it would be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oof. Okay, tasty. Right, let's move on, shall we? We'll talk about a team next. Well, they've got a lot going on at the moment. The Dallas Cowboys. Can the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott, who is going to be out injured for the next few weeks? It's not going to happen this year. Can it ever happen?
I'm ready to get into this.
Let's go, Brian.
Go on, Brian.
I can feel the heat right now. I'm ready to get into this.
Let's go.
Hell no. Hell no. No. I'll stand up and run around and do circles and push-ups. The Dallas Cowboys, and I would love to in a couple years when I'm still in London to eat my words on this one. The Dallas Cowboys will not win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott because it all starts at the top in the NFL. And as much as we talk about quarterbacks and wide receivers and the defense and your coordinator and all these things, it is a top-down business. It is a Fortune 500 CEO type business. And so what that means is it comes down to your owner and your general manager and your head coach and alignment and all those beautiful synergistic words. And the Cowboys don't have any of it. They are the worst run organization that should be successful in the NFL, and it all comes down to Jerry Jones. So while this happens with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott is basically suspended, isn't active on the on game day, doesn't get on the team flight, is missing meetings, and Jerry Jones, the president, owner, and GM, the only person to hold all those 3 titles in the NFL, he's the one that decided it was a brilliant idea to bring Ezekiel Elliott back with Dak Prescott. So no, Dak Prescott is not good enough right now. The Cowboys are a dysfunctional team. The chemistry is not there. The defense is not good enough. They have to make so many changes, and Jerry Jones is afraid to make those changes. So I don't see any way possible the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott.
But the way that you're talking about it, it makes it sound, you makes it sound like, well, they're not going to win it with Dak Prescott, but none of this is actually to do with Dak Prescott and how he plays.
Dak Prescott, if you look at the numbers the last few years, right? I mean, statistically, factually, Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback. Dak Prescott's been an MVP conversation. So Dak Prescott, now the problem becomes the playoffs, right? And there's going to be a scapegoat, there's going to be somebody to blame. Dak Prescott is good enough to make the playoffs, to win a playoff game, to get to the NFC Championship. There's no doubt about that. Are the Cowboys good enough? Are they well run enough? No. And that is partially what is holding Dak Prescott back. You cannot ask Dak Prescott to win a Super Bowl and have Ezekiel Elliott be your primary running back. That's absolutely insane.
So this is in no way, Phoebe,
she can disagree.
Dak Prescott's fault by the sound of it. Well, Brian is obviously so passionate about this, but at the end of the day, you are right on one point. Dak Prescott, over the last few years, throughout the regular season, he has been, not this season necessarily, but he has been consistently good, top 10 quarterback. So is it not his fault then?
I'm going to say it's not his fault. I do actually agree with Brian on a lot of what he said because of the fact that Dak Prescott on his own, last year he had an MVP caliber year. And so if you took that exact setup with the support around him and then did it again, yes, then he would be able to win you a Super Bowl. But he doesn't have the supporting cast. He doesn't have I mean, look, Mike McCarthy is in his last year of contract. Everyone was surprised they brought him back again this year, but it does. It always starts at the top. It starts with Jerry Jones.
If you put Dak Prescott on the Baltimore Ravens right now,
that's a darn good team.
100%.
Put him on the 49ers. Don't put him on the Chiefs because no one will. The Chiefs will be the most hated team in America. But he is a good enough quarterback. He has interception issues and he can have turnovers at the worst time and he has to prove it in the playoffs. And we've been saying these things for years. But ultimately, it is not Dak's fault. But we can really break down, the defense and the offense and the pieces, all these things. But for me, it's a chemistry issue with this team. They don't seem in sync, whether it's penalties, whether it's turnovers. Mike McCarthy is not the right coach for this team. All those things, if all that is off, it's really, really, really hard to win a Super Bowl. And Dak's going to be out for a month because he's getting older and he has a hamstring issue.
Well, did the Dallas Cowboys then? I mean, we're looking not just with Dak Prescott then, but let's look at what's the word? Holistically, right?
I love. Yes, that's a good word.
Let's look at it holistically then. Did the Dallas Cowboys make a mistake giving Dak Prescott that humongous contract?
I mean, it's never just one thing. I think it was definitely too much money, right? But it's too much money in the sense that you needed to bring in other people. You give the most amount of money to your quarterback and to a singular star receiver, and you don't do anything else. So there's no way you're going to rely on those two people to carry you through an entire season. You have to have other people. Ezekiel Elliott is not the guy. We saw that before. You bring him back in. You have not enough receivers in general. You need to be able to strengthen that defensively. The whole offseason, I'm getting flustered by the fact that this whole offseason, you lose your starting left guard, you lose your center, you've got nobody to protect, you're not paying anybody.
They used to have one of the best offensive lines 100%,
and you
football.
Get rid of it. Yeah. And you get rid of it. So there's no way that you are going to be successful when you're not investing in your team. We use the example all the time. Tom Brady goes to the Buccaneers. He takes a pay cut in order to bring everybody else up. That is the level that you need to be. If you're thinking, we're going to be a Super Bowl team, but you look last week on the sideline, Dak's sitting there being like, man, we suck.
There we go. That's what I was going to say, because the Dallas Cowboys, they lose to the Atlanta Falcons, and there he is on the sideline saying, we suck. Now, you've worked with NFL teams before, Phoebe. What does that say about your quarterback saying that?
You cannot say that because, look, first off, you got to go like this. This is why coaches
You just have to cover your mouth and do like something. A baseball thing.
It's like you're calling a play.
Honestly, you can't because you're always on the camera. People are always looking for you to mess up. I mean, Anthony Richardson yawned on the sideline, and they have that on your big screen because they're looking for you to mess up. That's what the media
optics.
does.
What I always say, it's optics, NFL
it is.
optics.
So you cannot if I'm sitting there, I'm a receiver. First off, I know we suck, right? Like, you don't have to say it out loud to know where you're at as an organization. There's so many issues, whether you're talking about the fact a couple weeks ago, players are complaining about how it's like a zoo in there. Jerry Jones is they're saying that basically the brand is more important than the Super Bowl.
It is. The brand's more important.
I mean, all of this is here. All this is floating, but you don't say it out loud. And you don't say it in the middle of a game when you've got to get out there, fake it till you make it, be like, guys, we can do this. We can pull it together. No, you just said we suck.
And he's not on the field either as well. So, it could easily be, like the defense is on the field right now. That could be interpreted as, our defense.
The problem is, it is the optics of it. You're being paid $240 million. You got your contract that everyone's been talking about for years. Right before the season started, you are the highest paid quarterback by average annual value in NFL history. You're the highest paid player in NFL history, and you were on the sideline, hurt, losing to Kirk Cousins, 3-5. Your buddy, Ezekiel Elliott, couldn't get on the team plane, and you're saying we bleeping suck. So whether you're talking about the defense or the blocking or Jerry Jones or whatever it is, the message that sends is that he knows, Dak Prescott knows the Dallas Cowboys are not good enough, but he had to take the money. He wasn't going anywhere else, and that's part of the problem. Phoebe was 100% right. It is more about the brand and making money and the image and Jerry Jones being able to fly around in this helicopter and I'm Jerry Jones and this is, I run the NFL. No. It's not about
impression I've ever heard of anybody in my life.
Thank you very much. It is not about winning the Super Bowl for Jerry Jones, and it has not been since Jimmy Johnson left the building.
But he'll argue that it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Well, he's lying, but he's lying to you because that's what Jerry Jones is a salesman. Jerry Jones wants you to buy Cowboys merchandise and travel all over the world to go to AT&T Stadium, look at his amazing stadium, and make him more money.
But you can see how angry he has got when people have been criticizing him recently. He has been, quite vocal about the criticism.
Good for him. He deserves all the criticism in the world. And the thing Jerry Jones should do, if he wanted to win a Super Bowl, and I'm very serious about this, he's not going to sell the Cowboys. He would give up power as president, general manager, and owner because he cannot do it. He has mismanaged the salary cap so bad. And I tell you this, last week on the program, I was joking but honest. Cowboys, should sell going into the trade deadline. How in the world are they going to turn this around in a couple years when you have Jaden Daniels, who is going to be Rookie of the Year? You have Jalen Hurts is not going anywhere. So the first thing, Phoebe knows this, the first thing you have to do in the NFL, and the coaches, this is all they preach, you have to win your division. You win your division, you are automatically in the playoffs. The Cowboys can't even win their division right now. Jerry Jones has to give up power, but he's too proud to do it.
Okay, I've got one more question about the Dallas Cowboys to ask you both, but let's just finalize this one. One word. Can the Dallas Cowboys ever win a Super Bowl with a Dak Prescott?
I have to use 2 words. Hell no. No.
And Phoebe Schechter.
That's too hard. That's too hard because it's not about Dak Prescott. It's about the whole. Or can Dak win with the Cowboys? Maybe that's a better way of framing it.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Answer that. No. Well,
Good answer.
Well, here's another question to ask: can the Dallas Cowboys ever win a Super Bowl with Jerry Jones?
Ooh.
No.
I don't.
So Jerry Jones, hold on.
Is not good.
Jerry Jones might live till he's about 150 because he's going to probably freeze himself and do all these weird things. So they might eventually win a Super Bowl in 2100.
Well, let's just finish on one question on this subject, right? With the Dallas Cowboys, Phoebe, what do they do next? To have any hope of winning a Super Bowl, let's go straight to next season. They want to win a Super Bowl next season. Not going to happen this season. How do they do it?
You have to look at your coaching staff. You have to change the coaches. I mean, Mike McCarthy on 4th and 1 is slamming an iPad on the floor on a jet sweep to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the play calling's not there. The culture is not there. People are playing as individuals. They're not playing as a team.
How do you change the culture then? Because if you've got Jerry Jones there, and if you say that that's a problem, you need somebody that's completely separate.
She is 100,000 billion% right.
And I've been coming.
I have been, and you can save that clip and play it over and over. I have been coming on this program week after week saying, Mike McCarthy, this feels like the last year. This will be the last year. Unless they have the most miraculous turnaround of all time. Hope it happens for them with Cooper Rush. That would be an amazing story. Mike McCarthy has to be gone. How do you change the culture in the NFL? You can't fire the owner. You fire the head coach.
Well, speaking of head coaches who may be gone, well, in this case, they're definitely gone. Dennis Allen, he has been fired as the head coach from the New Orleans Saints. It is potentially, something that, a lot of people thought might happen. Maybe a surprise it happened now in the middle of the season rather than later at the end of the season. However, we need to discuss Who is the next head coach to be fired? Brian.
Doug Peterson, Jacksonville Jaguars. And it should have happened already. I have nothing against Doug Peterson personally, professionally. He is not good enough for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It ended very badly with him in Philadelphia. Shad Khan got this absolutely wrong at a critical time for the franchise where you got it wrong with Urban Meyer. You have Trevor Lawrence. You have a #1 overall quarterback, a generational quarterback, and Trevor Lawrence has only gone backward. The Jaguars have only gone backward. The Jaguars going into the last season were Super Bowl contenders to a lot of the media and even their fan base. They cannot win a game right now. They're not good enough. They're not going forward. Doug Peterson should be gone already. But I tell you what, and we're going to get into this, it's going to be a long list this year. We've already seen 2 coaches fired midseason. That doesn't really happen in the NFL. There's a lot of teams that are underperforming, and it's more than ever. It's a cutthroat 24/7, 365 business run by billionaires. They want answers and accountability, and we just said this, the easiest way to do it is to fire your head coach.
Well, it's interesting in the case of Dennis Allen, actually, because there seemed to be some murmurings that the locker room wasn't very happy with how everything had been going. In fact, as well, former players had been discussing how they really didn't like Dennis Allen and the quarterback, in particular, Derek Carr. Like Michael Thomas. Can we take a look at what Michael Thomas tweeted? There we go. They fired all them coaches trying to cover his flaws up, still doing the same, insert bad word here. Fair to say, Michael Thomas, who was an integral part of the New Orleans Saints for years, for him to be so vocal, he's not scared of being vocal as well. That kind of says, in this situation, but in other situations as well, what is happening in the locker room. It's not all necessarily like, what is it, roses, is it?
Sunshine and rainbows.
That's the one, that's it. It's not though, is it? And, and it's important to look at as well. Like, we kind of think sometimes, well, everyone's going to be behind the head coach. It's not always the case.
No, it's not. And, I think within an organization, when you have a good organization, you do try and have those conversations inside as much as possible. You want to be united front. However, if we look at even how Dennis Allen ended up in this position, he took over from Sean Payton. And so it wasn't necessarily the method in which, just because you're a good defensive coordinator does not make you a great head coach. And you have to be a leader of people when you're in that head coach role. And I think really the firing of him, there were talks about it last year. People were surprised again that he kind of survived it. He looked great for those first 2 weeks when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, who really does a lot of nice things with Derek Carr. However, you lose 7 straight, first time you've lost 7 straight since 1999. And you just can't do that, especially when your last game loss is to the Carolina Panthers.
You can't lose to the Panthers.
I think that was a real nail in the coffin.
You saw Cam Jordan, who's considered a Saints legend now, basically saying, and he's quite a jovial guy, he's quite a funny guy, and he was basically just saying, guys, didn't think it would be this bad. We lost
to the Panthers.
He literally said that. He literally said it like that. And you know what? Really quickly as well, it's bizarre as well. It's bizarre. Dennis Allen fired mid-season. Not the first time this has happened. When he was head coach of the Oakland Raiders, who was his quarterback with the New Orleans Saints? Derek Carr. Who was his quarterback with the Oakland Raiders? Derek Carr. Yep. First time that has ever happened. And in fact, that loss to the Carolina Panthers means that if Derek Carr loses against the Las Vegas Raiders, he'll be the first NFL player, I think I'm correct in saying this, the first NFL player to lose to every single NFL team. That is not a stat you want. Okay, so Dennis Allen's gone. With Doug Peterson, Jacksonville Jaguars is Brian's choice. We'll go through a few more, though. Phoebe, is anyone that pops to mind?
I don't know if they would fire him, and I love him. I love Brian Daboll. He was my OC in Buffalo, but I think there's definitely a lot of tension right now. I mean, I was jokingly saying that stat earlier, but it's very real. The second touchdown that Daniel Jones has thrown at MetLife Stadium in over a year, since New Year's Eve of 23. I mean, you can't survive like that. And you come in as an offensive mind, you've worked with young quarterbacks before, you worked with Tom Brady, you've been in Alabama, you've been in some of the top places with top guys. And I think there's definitely pressure. He did sign a 5-year contract with the Giants, so what that actually looks like. And they did inherit, let's not be wrong about this, Joe Shane and himself did inherit Daniel Jones, but then you paid him. And so I think that's really where my struggle with it is. Daboll is a great, smart guy. He sees what's happening on the field. He doesn't need us to tell him that Daniel Jones is not the guy, but you start to question, well, what is your long-term plan here? Because it doesn't feel like there is one. And that's hard when you're thinking you're wanting to be a part of this franchise and you still need a franchise quarterback.
Do you think it's more common that we're seeing head coaches getting fired mid-season, Phoebe?
I think it's happening now more. I think, the Premier League probably has a bit of influence on that as well, where we've seen, how many head coaches or general managers have been fired so far this year. I think but we're definitely living in an age of instant gratification, right? It's very rare that you have a Mike Tomlinson, the Steelers who've had 3 head coaches in the X amount of years. That is a big rarity. And I think it's so hard to keep that momentum and be positive when you're thinking, we got to win now. The whole thing with the NFL is a parity, and you get the option to choose players.
What's the benefit though of it doing this, Brian? Because if you look at it from the Saints' point of view, right, they're essentially out of contention for the playoffs, right? You fire your head coach. It isn't like the Premier League in the sense where in the Premier League you can be like, and then we can look at Man United. Be like, hey, this player, let's get
and
this
you're doing the
Premier
League because you don't want to get relegated. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to.
But you can't just in the NFL. It's not as easy as just being like, hey, let's go and immediately hire our new head coach.
And normally, so when I was covering the NFL in America for a while, I and some of my colleagues did a study on this because I was covering the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans at the time were one of the worst teams in the NFL. And there are people who have written about this before. If you go back and you start tracking the data and actually, put some science to this, it does not usually work for you. The teams that fire their coaches consistently do not magically turn into playoff contenders, Super Bowl contenders. They don't win the Super Bowl.
Look at the Panthers.
Yeah, you have to have consistency. You have to have top-down alignment. All these buzzwords, they are real. However, we are in a world now where it's the social media world. It is a fishbowl world. It is a media world. It's an instant gratification world. And these owners, look at Carolina and how they handled Frank Reich, and now they're a mess with Bryce Young. I also look at how it affects the quarterbacks. You look at Indianapolis and Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson, and now you promote Joe Flacco because Anthony Richardson taps out.
Is Shane Steichen another person that we can consider?
Shane Steichen could very well be gone after this year. I could go through a list. There's going to be about 8 or 9 guys that get fired this year, but it's this lack of uncertainty. What happens a lot is mid-season, these coaches know, because I've been in these buildings enough and dealt with these and have sources and talked to people and dealt with all the dysfunction before. And around mid-season, early season if you're in the New Orleans Saints, but around mid-season, you start hitting this point where coaches are coaching for their jobs and their future and their contract. And so they are playing players, they're promoting quarterbacks, they're benching quarterbacks, all not for the greater good of the organization and the build for 2 or 3 years down the road, so they can win right now and get 7 wins and show a little promise and keep their job for next year. And that's what you're having happen a lot in the NFL right now.
Let's talk about that actually really quickly in terms of Matt Eberflus and the Chicago Bears, because and I think I've mentioned this before. It sometimes seems a little bizarre that you've got your, brand new rookie quarterback, the future of your franchise. What is it, that phrase? The generational quarterback. I love that phrase. So you've got that person, and then who do you lump them with? Well, actually a head coach that may or may not be on the way out.
The fans don't love and could have gotten fired last offseason,
Yeah, so Matt Eberflus seems like a good example for that.
Yeah, and I want to throw out a name that we're not talking about right now that you continue to hear murmurings about. I don't believe it's fully his fault, because you have Tua Tagovailoa with the Miami Dolphins, and he's had all of his concussion issues. And I fully believe that if you're a well-run NFL organization, your depth chart, your roster, that is a GM's decision, unless you have a Bill Belichick and he has ultimate power. So Mike McDaniel is not in charge of the roster for the Miami Dolphins. However, that is his team. And you have Tua and you have all your concussion issues. He has to have a better answer at backup quarterback, and he hasn't for 2 years right now. And this is a team that you have Tyreek Hill, you have talent, you have an owner who has high expectations. Mike McDaniel, if this continues for the Miami Dolphins, I will not be surprised if he's gone. Look at Nick Sirianni he almost lost his job last year. It is an unforgiving, ruthless business. It's called NFL for a reason, not for long. And if you underperform, you are gone now. And there's going to be about 9 or 10 coaches that we get fired this year.
All right. So are we going with Brian Dable? You don't want to say it, do you?
I don't want to say it.
So you're saying Brian Dable, and who are you?
Doug, I do not see how Doug Peterson comes back with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the extra point. I'm going to throw this over to you, Brian. Max Crosby.
Speaking of coaches who could very well be fired, Antonio Pierce is basically in the first year of his deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. He was an interim coach, but this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I just think the whole dynamic can be funny and just so off for NFL teams anymore. Max Crosby is their best player. You cannot trade Max Crosby. He's a Raider for life. He's got all the tats. He spent last season saying that if you don't bring Antonio Pierce, who is the interim coach, back, I'm leaving this organization. Now, nobody with the Raiders wants to play for Antonio Pierce. He just fired 3 coaches mid-season. He fired the offensive coordinator that he handpicked. And if this continues, Antonio Pierce will not be back with the Raiders. But Max Crosby, laid himself out and said, over my dead body, if you don't bring him back, I'm gone. So point being, you cannot have your players running the organization. You have to have strong ownership, and you have to have front office alignment. And we don't have that, which you have not had with the Raiders in a long, long time. This is what you get. So the irony of that Max Crosby says, you have to bring back Antonio Pierce. And now Antonio Pierce is one of the most likely coaches to get fired. An absolute mess for the Las Vegas Raiders.
So, I kind of think that when you're a head coach in this situation like Antonio Pierce is, you look at, well, what could I say? What can I say to ownership about why we weren't successful this season? And one of the things I think, Phoebe, is, well, we don't have a franchise quarterback. It's so obvious that he is not happy with his quarterbacks. How many times has he dropped Gardner Minshew? He keeps putting him in. He's like, nah, don't want him. Nah, don't want him. Keeps putting him in. No, don't want him. It's obvious he's not happy. Now, you could say, for example, like he put him there, or he was part of the process for putting him there.
Should have had a better quarterback competition. But
they'll say they had 2 good quarterbacks in Gardner Minshew or
who would say that?
Well. They will say that.
Nobody would say that. The Las Vegas Raiders won't. If they thought that Gardner Minshew was a good quarterback, they wouldn't keep benching. Aiden O'Connell wasn't a starter. This is a franchise, and I always go to the ownership. If your ownership is off, as your front office is off, the whole team is off. And this is, again, like Jerry Jones with the Cowboys. This is Mark Davis. But Antonio Pierce, this is my problem with Antonio Pierce. You chose those coaches. You had 100% control. And so he just threw his coaching staff under the bus. This is a team that lacks discipline. They lead the NFL in turnovers. You don't have an answer at quarterback. But I'm gonna tell to my staff in my locker room, well, the guys that I hired, you're gone midseason. I'm blaming you for my inadequacies as a head coach.
Antonio Pierce?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, right? Because I hear what you're saying. And Max Crosby calling for Antonio Pierce to be the head coach, they've had such negative experiences. Yeah. And you're like, I finally have a guy who embodies what we're doing out here in Vegas, understands the kind of ethos. So you get behind him because you're like, this is so nice. We're all actually enjoying it. It is so hard to be in a losing building. Yeah. You talk about coaches getting fired mid-season. The second that starts happening, doors start closing to rooms. People work in silos.
And people take sides very, very quickly.
100%. You're spot on, and it's really a tough environment to be in. And the players feel that too, right? It's not like mom and dad are fighting and they can hide it. Like everybody feels it in every single meeting. And so.
But do you get a sense of this though before the season? Before the season, no games have started. In theory, this toxic, locker room hasn't had a chance to flourish. Do you know what I mean?
But I don't think there was a toxic locker room in the preseason. I mean, because you're not playing games. You don't know who you are yet. We talk so much, you don't really know who you are till week 4. And ultimately, I understand why Antonio Pierce is bringing his own coaches, because you want people that when things go bad, how are you going to react? Can you overcome? Can you be resilient? Can you handle stress? Like, how do you operate in those situations? So I'm going to want people that I can work with in those situations, and I have experienced that with before. The problem is, now you've been losing. You have those people that you've chosen to be there. Things are hitting the fan, and you're like, "Oh, these aren't the guys I thought they were." Or I'm going to have to save myself, so therefore, I need to get rid of these guys and be like, "Hey, it's them, not me."
Last week I spoke about how I think the New York Jets are going to have a bit of a reset come this summer. Do you see the same thing happening with the Las Vegas Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these organizations need to, right? Because there's no way you can look at teams like the Chargers, who come in with brand new staff, brand new, coaches defensively, who've been phenomenal, great communication skills. And then you don't say, well, they're doing it. They're brand new. They're year 1. They've inherited quarterback, whether they choose Justin Herbert or not. Same with the Raiders. Any team has to make
And how does Tom Brady? Tom Brady is a part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. He signed on. It's already been reported and leaked, I'm sure intentionally, that Tom Brady will have say. He'll have influence over the Raiders' decision-making. There's no way Tom Brady accepts Antonio Pierce, who's more, for me, of a coordinator than a head coach. It's not all rah-rah. It's not about, Raiders. And that only works for so long. You have to win games and have a high-functioning NFL team, and Antonio Pierce isn't doing it. I don't see how Tom Brady accepts that.
Tom Brady, the color commentator right now for Fox. Tom Brady, the part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Tom Brady, future Las Vegas Raiders head coach.
God.
There's somebody called Mike Vrabel, who he knows pretty well, who just a few years ago was one of the best coaches in the NFL and did a lot with the Tennessee Titans. I would not be surprised if Mike Vrabel ends up becoming the Las Vegas Raiders' new head coach.
Okay, can we move on to maybe my favorite thing that's, well, not that it has happened ever in the NFL, but definitely something that I unbelievably enjoyed seeing this weekend. Saquon Barkley with potentially, I actually said this, right? I said this online the other day, and people were going at me saying that I've never seen a good running back play. This is potentially the best thing that I have ever seen a running back do. Saquon Barkley juking one player, getting around one, and then how would you even describe it? I don't even know how to describe it. Jumps over one player, but from behind.
He looked, and I mean this in the biggest compliment of all time. And I'm going to talk about my dog. He looks like my dog when he chases after a squirrel in the park, and the squirrel's going up the tree, and my dog is convinced he's going to get it, and he does this leap, and you're like, you just how in the world can you do that when you are on the ground? Saquon Barkley as an athlete is just unbelievable. Quadzilla, they call him for a reason. I don't even know, how do you do that in real time? That's the thing. How does your brain...
Slow-mo is impressive, but in real time, it's insane. In real time,
that is your athletic instinct from birth, from 1 year old. How does that come out? And that's what you decide to do, and you can pull it off. Is absolutely...
Well, let's just quickly talk about that, actually. You mentioned, athletic ability for Saquon Barkley there. Let's talk about NFL athletes, and how they compare maybe to other athletes worldwide. Now, obviously, sport is sport. Every sport is different. Do you think that NFL athletes have an argument to say that they could be the greatest athletes in the world?
I think naturally, yes. I mean, they're phenomenal at what they do. There's so many different changes in direction. It's not like, other sports where you're so specifically skilled. You go, whether it's straight line, linear speed, strength. It combines all the elements of everything, right? That's why you find so many multi-sport athletes do such a great job when it comes to American football, because they are phenomenal. And, just on Barkley, the fact that he's able to feel space, feel contact, like literally hurdle a 5'9" man backwards
from behind,
is and then the flexibility of all that. Very rarely do you think about your offensive line. And I think that's what makes the NFL and American football so special too, is you need people who are 5'7" and you need people who are 6'8", and you all have to work together.
You can weigh 180 pounds or 350 pounds, and you can still be an incredible athlete. That is what makes the NFL really unique.
Okay, well, that's interesting you say that then, because that might mean that some of these athletes could transition to other sports in theory if they decided to. So let's say short distance running, I would imagine. Do you think that if an NFL athlete right now said, I don't want to play American football anymore, I want to be 100-meter champion, 200-meter champion, you think that they could get into the Olympics?
There was this conversation last summer, and it kind of came up during the Olympics, and this was the thing. I will say this. I grew up and covering sports for more than 20 years and being an NBA beat writer, Major League Baseball beat writer, NFL beat writer, covering all those three sports, college football, et cetera. I always thought, and not that I'm intelligent, but the intelligent sports fan in America would always say, well, if you really want to know, the best athlete is an NBA athlete, because you look at someone like LeBron James and the start and stop of that, running up and down the court, the athleticism, the explosiveness, incredible athlete. I will say, being over here, what Premier League athletes are able to do, and all the running involved and all the quick cuts, and it's actually a very physical, at times very violent game. For me, I don't think you can pick, and I think that's the beauty of this. And normally I'm like, yes, yes, no, no. I was being in Paris during the Olympics. You look at someone like Noah Lyles.
Well, actually, let's stop there for a second. Actually, we can hear from Noah Lyles now talking about this subject.
The thing that hurts me the most is that I have to watch the NBA Finals, and they have world champion on their head. World champion of what? The United States? Don't get me wrong. I love the U.S. at times. But that ain't the world. That is not the world. We are the world. We have almost every country out here fighting, thriving, putting on their flag to show that they are represented. There ain't no flags in the NBA.
I mean, is it difficult to compare?
First of all, I every time I see that, I hate everything about that. It is so misguided and short-sighted, and he thinks he's being super smart, and he actually doesn't know at all what he's talking about. So the NBA is a truly international game, just like Major League Baseball is a truly international game. Where does Shohei Ohtani come from? Shohei Ohtani is not from Iowa. He's not from Florida.
But his argument is probably more like, it's not as if the champion of the NBA or whatever plays.
Because they all go to play. Now, some play in France and some play in Spain, and they end up ultimately coming over. Manu Ginobili, Victor Wembanyama, go through the list. Tony Parker, the best players in the world go to play in the NBA. And if you don't understand that, and that's a really simple fact, that's on you. That's not on LeBron James. LeBron James is the best athlete in NBA history, and he would have beaten anybody in the world, which is what he's done for the last 20 years.
You could argue that the Premier League, though, let's say for Premier League, for example, some of the best players in the world go to the Premier League, but, not all of them. Are you world champions if you win the Premier League?
You're world champions if you win the World Cup. It's a different setup. So that is not LeBron James's fault. That is not Kevin Durant's fault. That Team USA wins, the Olympic gold medal, but that's a different setup. The setup, because the NBA is so big, because Major League Baseball is so big, nothing could compare with it. Whereas Premier League, you have your leagues in Spain, your leagues in Germany, you have La Liga, all these things. It's a different setup, so it's not their fault. LeBron James every year, he's not winning the title every year with the Lakers, but he is beating the best players in the world to play basketball, just like Shohei Ohtani is beating the best players in the world to play baseball. That is the system.
But I don't think that's what he's saying. I think it is about the actual tournament structure. You talk about the Super Bowl where champions of the world or baseball, they're saying, it's not saying that all the players aren't from around the world. I mean, look at our International Player Pathway program. You literally have people represented from around the world. We just, this past weekend for the Giants, Jude McIntyre from Ireland, being the kicker there. I don't think it's saying that, but I can see what he's saying when he's saying, you can't say that as a Super Bowl, like you are the world champions. No, your competition only takes place. It's not other countries.
It's splitting hairs. Yeah, it's splitting hairs.
I don't think it is splitting hairs.
It is splitting hairs.
I don't think it is.
No, because the NFL is so big and Major League Baseball is so big and the NBA is so big because they are in America and they are the biggest sports in the world along with Premier League, that they don't have any competition. And so Major League, it's amazing that people don't understand this. Major League Baseball plays 162 games a year. It is basically a year-long sport. So they don't have the ability to go out and play Australia. If the Los Angeles Dodgers played a team from Australia, they would beat them 30-0.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone's disagreeing though with that. I don't think anyone's saying, they're not. It's not the Super Bowl champion is going to be the best NFL team, the best American football team in the world. But it's not about that, though.
There doesn't need to be a system for it. There is no system, and there never will be a system. Major League Baseball will never have a World Series where it's teams from Australia and Japan and all over. There's no need for it. Everyone goes to play in Major League Baseball.
I feel like you've had this argument before, Brian. I feel like this has got to you before.
It's amazing because everyone who plays in the NBA, it's actually not me, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, everybody in the NBA, coaches, players, fans, they know how wrong Noah Lyles is. That's what's funny to me, that he thinks that he's outsmarted the whole system when it's actually a very, very, he's splitting hairs and being able to validate himself when actually anyone who knows the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NFL, where's the competition in the NFL? Well, everyone goes to play in the NFL. They're not playing a team from Denmark. They're playing, the Kansas City Chiefs play the San Francisco 49ers to be the best team in the world. And if you're good enough to get in the NFL, you go to the NFL. You don't go to Denmark. You don't go to Australia. You try to get Lewis. He can't even play in the NFL right now, and he was a great rugby athlete.
But do you know who currently holds the record for the most World Baseball Classics?
Nobody cares about the World Baseball Classic.
Japan.
Nobody cares.
Japan do.
It doesn't matter.
Who did they beat in the last one?
But all the best players,
the US.
All the best players don't play in it. Nobody cares about the World Baseball Classic. It's not a serious tournament, and they don't play it every year. They play it every few years. It's not that big of a thing. I know.
I'd like to apologize to anybody that's listening, watching right now that played in the World Baseball Classic.
I just think you have to separate the fact that you're talking either about international competition, whether you're representing your country, or you're talking about your Super Bowls, your whatever that may be, World Cup, things like that. I think those are just very different things because you're either representing your country or you're representing your team. Because you still, within rugby, have World Cups, you have international competition around the world and other sports, cricket, things like that. So I just think they are very different items at the end of the day. And I think it's, when Noah Lyles was saying that, he's in a situation where he's surrounded by every other country. They're competing internationally.
He's in a completely different system. So great for him, and he's an incredible athlete, and he's a gold medalist, and that's awesome. But why do you need to try to lessen what NBA? That's their problem. I fully agree with them. Why does he need to lessen what the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball does, because he wants to make himself feel better, and that probably means that Noah Lyles he probably does have a few issues.
I'm glad that we got into this conversation like here, because if we got into this conversation, we were in a pub or something right now. Well, I can't imagine what Brian would be like having that conversation.
We'd have a few pints. We'd have
a few pints, and it'd be louder and louder, bringing in everybody around. All right, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much, Phoebe. That is all from us this week. If you've enjoyed today, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, talkSPORT Endzone, for more exclusive content and interviews. We'll be back next week.